Hi there and welcome everyone to this second webinar event that we have going on. So hello, I am Dianne Dredge, and on behalf of Commerce Ballarat, I'm your host for today's webinar. Now, Commerce Ballarat has organised this two-part webinar series in order to discuss the future of tourism and events in Ballarat and the Ballarat business community. And it's really time to start thinking about resilience and how the industry can position themselves for the future after COVID. So in this webinar, I've got two guests with me. Stu Speirs is the Director of Silverlining Silverlining Strategy. And Stu is actually currently undertaking an assessment and a reevaluation of Ballarat's event strategy. And he's going to be able to draw from that experience, but also a range of larger thinking about what's going on in the event space. The second person that I've got with us today on the panel is Alana Thomson. And Alana Thomson is a lecturer at Federation University, and she's in the business school. And Alana's real interests are in sustainable events, but also making sure that the value that's generated from events is actually something that stays in those local communities. And so I think that's really a very topical thing to talk about today. We've also got Natalie O'Brien with us again, but she will be later on engaging in the conversation and the question and answer. So just a couple of housekeeping rules for the moment. You are currently muted, and we've got the question and answer function open. So I would encourage you, as you're listening to this webinar, to type your questions into the question and answer function on the web page, and I will be going through those, and I will pop them into the conversation, or we can open it up a little bit later on and I will ask those questions towards the end. So please don't wait until the end, just keep those questions rolling and I will monitor as they come through. So I'm just happy to welcome you, Stu. You there?
I am, Dianne. Thank you very much. And
welcome, Stu.
No problem at all in terms of mispronouncing the company name. It can be a bit of a tongue twister, that one, sorry.
The things you don't know when you start a business.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for that introduction. Yeah, great to be here today. Let me just bring up where I'm at presentation-wise. So, following on from last week's presentation in terms of broader tourism, I thought, particularly harking on the title of today's presentation about event fundamentals, what I've been finding with a lot of my clients, and most of which are local governments and the events that they invest in themselves, is it's a really good time to actually have a think about how healthy your underlying fundamentals are as an event. And the framework that I use and developed a few years ago that I take my clients through is this 6 fundamentals of a sustainable event, and to briefly run through them and then talk about how that actually applies at a Ballarat level. I'll just take you through them right now. So they sort of fall underneath 2 broad categories. Internal and external, if you like, or community connection and capacity, and we'll touch on the external in a moment. But in terms of fundamental number 1, for events to understand and highlight content within an event that really aligns with local values. And I think for Ballarat, that's where a lot of the value from the prosperity framework can be drawn. I think it's a really good document, and one that council's put together that really sums up the aspirations of Ballarat residents, and is one that's a really good reference point for any events looking to ensure that they're tapping into a local psyche and getting that first fundamental right. Fundamental 2 in terms of event delivery capacity is just having a look at an objective look at your ability to actually deliver the event, and whether any partners need to be sought to actually improve the capacity to deliver, or some external advice, whether it be through webinars or anything else to strengthen your ability to deliver the event, a quality event. And then fundamental 3 is something that's probably important on a range of levels, least of which is probably just to keep a bit of morale happening in the sector at the moment, which is just reaching out to your key stakeholders, understanding where they sit at the moment, how they're going themselves, what their challenges are. And it's amazing the opportunities that come from just conversations around what people are experiencing and how they're getting through this time themselves. And so when you find alignment between yourselves and where a partner of yours is, it can bring in some great thinking, some great ideas, and just a sense that you're not alone in your day-to-day of trying to realise this next version of your event. That's fundamentals 1 to 3 underneath the internal facing side of things. When it comes to the external facing side of things, we're talking about the target market that you're trying to bring into an event, and their profile and the level of appeal that your event holds for them. The point of difference will remains a constant for whatever product you're selling, whether it be a tourism product or a fast-moving consumer good. A point of difference is critical, and ensuring that you've brought your point of difference to the fore is particularly important. So just refreshing yourself as to how you're differentiating yourself from other events, and for that matter, other places, Ballarat versus other peer destinations. Fundamental 5 being the target audience profile, understanding your audience. And I think in a brief conversation that Dianne and the group of us had before this presentation came along, I think that's where, again, it's a little bit like fundamental 3 in terms of key stakeholder support, is just reaching out to your key customers essentially, and your key external customers, and understanding how they're going, what their desires and needs are at this point in time, and perhaps having an objective think about the extent to which your event is or could adapt to still meet the same needs that your target audience is looking for. And when it comes to fundamental 6, planning and positioning, it's a question of timing, and timing at this point in time is something that's you probably need a crystal ball for to a certain extent, so we won't spend too much time on that, but just keeping in mind that ensuring your event is timed in a way that your target audience can actually get to it and spend money in the town is the other point that we've been reflecting on with my clients in the last 4 to 5 months. In terms of how that applies to Ballarat, I thought one of the really interesting points from last week's conversation was the extent to which the environment we're going to find ourselves when tourism opens back up is a particularly competitive one. And I think 2 of the reasons that I think Ballarat finds itself in a really, really good position, and this has come about not only from just understanding Ballarat through desk research, but some of the initial research that we've been doing and stakeholder interviews we've been doing as part of the refresh of the event strategy, has brought to the fore a couple of areas where Ballarat's very, very well placed. And visiting friends and relatives as a key market feels like a very, very powerful asset to draw upon and leverage. The conversations often come back to the extent to which people are moving back to Ballarat, starting up hospitality businesses, starting up businesses that are changing the face of what it means to be Ballarat. So tapping into your local residents and using them as your primary marketing tool essentially feels like the best way to cut through what will be a very, very cluttered above the line market. And secondly, a collaborative and innovative hospitality industry. It's almost a universal piece of feedback that we've heard so far as well in the work that we've done, is that hospitality is really on its toes in Ballarat and working really hard to be innovative. And they're a pretty collaborative bunch as well. So using them and making sure that you're in touch with them as an event to do whatever they can, understand firstly that your event is actually on in the first place, so they can then work to leverage their side of things, and create an immersive experience for anyone that does come to the event once it's actually up and running, and in turn create that powerful sort of word of mouth that we know is our most powerful marketing asset. So look, in the spirit of having a more of today is a bit more of a discussion, I'm just going to leave it there. That was a bit of a whirlwind. I'll pass over to Alana, but feel free to pop any questions into the chat button, and we'll get to those and open up conversation more broadly in a little bit.
Thanks, Stu. Alana.
Hi, everyone.
If anybody would like to put in any questions that they have into the chat function, as Stu said, we're happy to receive them.
All right, I'll kick off. I guess just to, from my side of things, start by acknowledging the traditional owners, paying respects to elders past and present, and extending respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Nation peoples. I'm Alana, I'm with Federation Business School. Some of you may see the elephant in the room that yes, I'm based in Brisbane, and I guess I just wanted to kick off by having a few qualifiers there, because what does some lecturer sitting in Brisbane on a Wednesday afternoon know about events in Ballarat? And so I guess a little bit of about me. I grew up in a family business in the outskirts of Sydney, and so from a very young age I knew the economic realities of working in a small business environment. I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the only one in my family that's still not working in the family business. And so what happened to me, I went to university and fell in love with research. But along the way, have worked in events across different sectors. So back when I was living in Sydney, worked on sport and charity events at some quite high profile venues in Sydney, did a little bit of work in the conference sector. Again, was in love with research, so went back and did my PhD. I moved to Queensland just before the 2011 floods. And when I got here, I was lucky enough to secure a job with the peak body for outdoor recreation in Queensland, and had some great experiences working in that not-for-profit role, organisation, but did do some work with our Brisbane Valley communities that were just devastated by the 2011 floods. And I guess on reflection, when Dianne reached out to be part of this, I did see some overlaps there in terms of the crisis environment that we're working in, our regional communities, and just having those experiences and really connecting with those. And our regional communities in Australia are awesome. And I think the fact that COVID's brought a lot of challenges for people, but also great opportunities like this to be able to bring people together and connect. So I'm now with Fed Uni. I have a range of different experiences that I bring with me. But yeah, let's start tracking through them. I guess to extend on what some of those points that Stu, what's happened there? Some of those points that Stu was talking about. Okay, we're going to play up here. So a little bit of a snapshot about where I'm seeing us in terms of events in COVID-19. Events, for those of you that are working in this sector, events have always had an important role in our communities. We know that there's evidence that showing the connectivity, the social capital, the well-being that events have in it for our communities. Also things that I'm really passionate about in terms of contributing to people's sense of identity, offering opportunities for escapism, and also those sometimes subtle or really overt opportunities for creativity and the generative possibilities that awesome events really bring to our communities. And I think a lot of them we're kind of missing at the moment in the environment that we're working in. But I think having opportunities to engage in this kind of stuff is now more important than ever. And if we can find some ways, and I'm going to show some suggestions about how we can engage with that. You guys will know mental health problems peaked alongside COVID-19 when we were right in the midst of a lot of things. And I'd say if we had a survey now in parts of Australia, we'd see similar results coming through. And we also know that work stress across all aspects of community is huge. And I will just say from my academic and lecturing perspective that there's research that's been shown around the angst that school leavers are feeling. My final year undergrad students are just you know, they're just feeling a little bit lost at the moment. So I really feel a strong sense of responsibility to be working with them to give them hope for the future. It's a very different environment to be finishing study compared to when I finished my undergraduate 15 years ago and felt like I had the world at my feet. But I do think for those of us working in events, we do need to, and we have opportunities to create, design and deliver events in new and innovative ways. I think for some people there's certainly been challenges presented, and for others they've been in a position, they've been willing and able to engage in the space differently. So I really hope you know, people that have taken time out this afternoon, seeing this as a valuable opportunity to rethink what we do. There's an industry article, the link's there if you want to have a little look, but it just kind of came up with 5 options for people working in events at the moment. So we can cancel, and a lot of that's happened, postpone. We're seeing a lot of that happen. I've just seen the Women's World Cup, Cricket World Cup's been postponed from early next year to all the way through to 2022, which just seems so far away. We can relocate, and I've seen some of those ideas happening around different events, but you know, people talking about coming to Queensland for different things. Now we have these crazy border closures in place, and so it kind of makes that a little bit challenging to be able to do that. And also, you know, we're talking here about what can we do in our own communities. So I do think, and there's been a lot of work in this space in terms of the virtual events and hybrid events. So hybrid, that mixture of having people in the one space and other people being able to link into it. So I think that there's real opportunity, particularly in regional communities, to kind of engage with this, because you can enter this space with a pretty minimal cost, and most people are already doing something online anyway, so it's just a rethink about how you move into that space. What I will say, and there's kind of, I think, some alignment with the education setting, going online or going virtual, no, you can't just deliver the same. It really has to be a lot of thought that goes into the concept. Okay, so I've got a couple of points here, like what is the experience that you're offering people? There's so many online events that I've signed up for over the last few months, and I can't tell you how many that I've actually shown up to, because I guess, you know, I've seen, oh, that kind of looks interesting, and then when it gets to it, like I'm busy, like I'm sure a lot of people are. I'm a working mum during COVID. My life's been turned upside down. And so there's these things that come along that I think, yeah, I'll click on it, and then I never come back to it. And so really, I think if we're going to go into this space, we can't do it half-heartedly. You really need to commit to it. What's the experience? And picking up on some of those things that Stu talked about, how do you engage your audience? And so is it enough for me just to click like or going on Facebook and you never engage with me again? Because I can promise you that I'm not coming unless you remind me what's going on. Also, what's the aspect of, you know, what can you service in this space, and is it scalable? So I think, you know, Dianne mentioned this last week in the webinar, that idea of testing things out. We're in a space full of uncertainty, and there's no, you know, golden ticket to anything. It really is just, you know, testing things out, brainstorming, working with you know, new partnerships or your old partnerships as well to see what might be possible. And I'd say there's my researcher bias coming through, but what's your feedback loop? How are you learning from people to be able to, you know, keep building and improving what you're doing? The other thing that I will say here is I think a lot of people go, oh, online, like it seems like a lot of work. Is it going to, you know, is it going to work? What some of the research that is taking place is showing is that hosting things online is actually enabling new markets to engage with events that haven't been able to before. And I think that that's something really that links in with the role of events in our branding. So if you think about different opportunities that you might have to put something on and aligning it with those the Ballarat tourism strategies like Stu was talking about, there's a real opportunity to reach out and to use those events to connect with people and you know, show those kind of experiences that you've got happening in the local economy. And the other thing I would say is, Diane's used the word, how do you make local events sticky? And I'd say there really is, again, now more than ever, a need for an integrated marketing plan. And so if, you know, you have someone like me that signs up and says, yeah, I'll go to that, and then if I don't hear from you again, it's unlikely I'm going to remember to come along. And so if you are in that online space, the integrated marketing communication becomes really important, making sure that you hold on to the people that have engaged at some point along the way. So there's a few things to think about, and I'm always, you know, happy and available to chat about these and you know, discuss ideas with anyone that wants to go down that direction. What I have put together, and my images aren't working for some reason, but I'm not, no, it's not going to come up. That's really annoying because it's a great image. Anyway, I'll describe it to you. There's an event that's just taken place in the UK, and it was titled, the headline is, the link's there if you can click through to it, the UK's first socially distanced event, and it's a concert that happened last week where people were put together in pods of scaffolding. So instead of having strips of seating, they each had their own you know, scaffolding pod to keep them separate, but they could enjoy the concert as they normally would. And it looked you know, like a field of scaffolding. And I guess the first thing that I thought about was, you know, what an innovative approach. And then the second thing I thought was, how expensive would that have been? And then the third thing I thought was, you know, where's that tension between what a great experience, but also how can we keep hold of our events in a way that we can still have accessible opportunities for people. So I think there's a few things to think about there, and hopefully you can see the image if we send the slides through later. But anyway, you know, have a look there. It just looked like a cool idea. 2,500 people came together in the UK to watch a music event, which is pretty cool in the environment that we're working in at the moment. Have some Queensland examples, and I think the nice thing we can learn from Queensland, and I will say, while we're not in the same predicament as New South Wales or Victoria at the moment, we're still operating to some pretty stringent conditions and guidelines in Queensland, and everyone is operating in a very risk-averse manner to make sure that nothing gets out of control here. So we have seen events running and planning to run. Last week as well, we had the Mount Isa Mines virtual rodeo, and I would say that anyone that is connected with people in Mount Isa, the fact that they've hosted an online or virtual rodeo has been a huge step up, or a huge kind of culture change for rodeo events and for regional Queensland. So that was quite cool and really successful, and was well supported by the Queensland government to go ahead too. So I thought that was just a cool example to show people when we think, oh no, that's not really going to happen, is it? And that happened. Another one of my favourite events that happens in Queensland, and I think there's a similar event in Ballarat. We have the Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers here, and what they're talking about doing, it will run at the end of September. They've reimagined their festival parade. So they did have a festival that ran on I think the first Saturday of the event. They're now having static displays throughout the town for 2 weeks. And the thing that I love about that is it's kind of meant that they're something that would happen on the one day is now accessible to people for that full 2 weeks. And like picking up on what Dianne talked about, we've now got something that people are attracted to in town. And to me, that just has potential for, you know, decent economic impact. We've got 2 weeks worth of people coming to see something instead of just the one day. And also just the, you know, the kind of community spirit that espouses as well is really important. These guys are also introducing virtual aspects. So they've got augmented reality apps. And now for some people, I know this might be at a different level of digital technology. I'm not a digital, you know, crazy person, but I love that we're seeing this kind of stuff happening in regional communities, that we're developing apps. This kind of stuff's been around for a while now. It's not expensive. As long as you're connected to the right people, you can come up with a really great, you know, digital product that kind of gives people an opportunity to engage with something that may not be a mass gathering per se. The other thing that they've outlined on their website is that some of their events are being rested just because there's too big a risk of anything happening around that. So I just, put up some examples. There's a few other examples that I've collected in my searching and watching of things over the last few weeks. So ideas that we're seeing in terms of like drive-ins, you know, so people are quite happy to stay in their cars and feel, you know, self-contained and safe. We're seeing drive-throughs of different things. So people putting on, you know, installations and that kind of stuff where people can drive past and the social distancing is still in place, but still quite something that you can, you know, pile into your car and go and see something with the family, which I think is really important just to get that kind of escapism happening in our current realities. There's community activations and more programs of activities happening. So like I said, with the Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers, instead of a one-day parade, we're now seeing a 2-week installation, which just kind of maximises the potential for people to engage. We're also seeing, I've got here, price point opportunities or unique access opportunities. So 2 different ends of the scale, but people are saying, okay, we can either, you know, put something out for the masses at a little bit of a cheaper rate than we normally would, or we're going to provide these really unique access opportunities, and seeing a lot of that happening in the hospitality space where people are organising you know, VIP packages, behind the scenes, online demonstrations and that kind of thing, which is really cool. But the thing that I would keep honing in on here is that communication and engagement, and a really high priority for people at the moment, just to keep reminding us what's happening and how you're responding to things and what opportunities are there to engage. The other example before I move on is the City to Surf. So that's happening in October. One of my students has just submitted an assignment on that, and it looks great what they're doing. Again, so they've set up as an app, it's a virtual race. You still have to pay to register, so I think that's a big thing that, you know, yes, we're offering online and virtual events, but how do we monetize them? You still need to pay to be part of this experience. That gives you access to the app, the normal merchandise that you'd get if you entered the City to Surf. There's a whole range of different things that they're doing to still, you know, present an opportunity for people to participate in. And I think they've also kind of shifted it. So they're not giving like placing prizes or anything like that this year. You kind of can't, because you're relying on technology and people using it appropriately. But what they have done is take a bit more of a focus on encouraging people's health and wellbeing. So they've got a lot more support programs, you know, for getting off the couch and that kind of thing. So they've shifted their focus a little bit with that event. And then I think, where was I going to go here? There's a couple of resources that I thought were interesting here before I finish up. The Queensland Tourism Industry Council, which I'm sure you guys have got an equivalent in Victoria. They've worked with the Queensland Government and Griffith University to put together an industry framework for COVID-safe events. And I thought that was just a nice resource for you guys to take a look through and just see what's starting to happen in this space. That was only released last month. Eventbrite, so some of them you will be aware of Eventbrite from a ticketing and marketing perspective. They've got a great bunch of resources and some hot tips around putting events online and monetizing those types of things as well. And just on Friday, Facebook have put out an announcement. They're now doing paid online events. So this is a really new development for Facebook, and it's really targeted towards the events industry in terms of small businesses. I think they've got really it's either free or very discounted to run these things at the moment. So there's an opportunity for something you want to dabble, try it out. I think it's a really nice starting point for people that want to get into that online event space. And then just the last couple of things I wanted to say. I wanted to reiterate what Dianne has said about partnerships and what Stu's said about stakeholders as well. It's really important, and I know it's through these discussions that I've been having over the last few weeks where new ideas are coming from and new opportunities are coming from in an environment where, do you know what, guys, when COVID hit, my grant funding, all these opportunities that I had just disappeared overnight. And so from a research and academic perspective, we've certainly felt the hit. But over the last few months with those conversations, we are seeing opportunities come through, which is exciting. I think there's huge potential to connect with Fed Uni, with our researchers and our lecturers. It's also huge potential to connect with students and look at ways to engage them. because a lot of them they want hope, and I think some of you guys probably have opportunities where you can give that to them in different, whether it's projects or little bits of research or, you know, feasibility studies, that kind of stuff. We can certainly work with you guys on that type of thing. And that was it, really. So I'm going to hand back to Dianne there and look forward to hearing people's questions.
Okay, thank you, Alana. That's fabulous there. We still don't have any questions in the question and answer function. That's okay. I'm going to give you some time to type those in now. But I thought perhaps I'd really like to ask, because you were the one that suggested to begin with about connecting with local community and continuing that ideation and creativity. Events have traditionally been very innovative and very creative. I mean, if we're comparing it to sort of the tourism sector, you know, there's a lot of creativity in the events, but how do we get that creativity going when it's hard to actually have those conversations? So any practical tips on sort of really doing that ideation and that creativity? Alana, you've mentioned some ideas of things that have happened, but how do you actually get people in these conversations at the moment?
I think that's a really good question, Dianne. And I'll say that because I think I'm just going to reality check for people. I'm a single mum with a toddler and I work full time. And when people say to me, "Oh, take COVID and, you know, pivot and blah, blah," I don't even remember to eat breakfast in the morning some days. So it's hard, it's tough. But this is something that I'm passionate about doing. And so I have to make those opportunities, and I do just send off emails. And I guess during this time, I've got to a point where I'm like, man, like all of the avenues I'd normally go down are pretty much closed to me. So there's a CEO of this organisation I'd like to work with, and I'm just going to shoot him an email because I don't have a lot to lose at the moment, to be honest. And so it has just been through, I guess, taking those brave steps, brave and bold, that's otherwise I'd be maybe second guessing myself. And now I'm just like, well, I don't have anything to lose. And if it's a conversation and something comes of it, then, and so that's been my approach. And that's where, yeah, people are responding. Not everyone, I know not everyone is, but people are. And so it is just about taking those steps. And I think, you know, thinking, oh, I'd like to do this. Okay, well, if you'd like to do it, you've got to give it a go at this point, I think. Yeah.
Stu, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I think the conversations I've been having, when it comes down to sort of points of difference with events and coming up with ideas that are perhaps place-based is generally where I'll revert back to, and understanding often the point of difference of an event will come from the place it's in, and that'll make it sustainable long-term as well. So I often turn to history of a place for my ideas, and you find yourself with some really, really interesting little bits that can be added in as event content. An event that comes to mind that I worked with recently is Gemfest up in Queensland. And in reading through their history, there was a famous drink that was invented, a very, very cheap drink, because the opal miners and gem miners, I should say, sometimes fell on hard times, and they'd innovate to make themselves a knockoff drink. And so by taking that knockoff drink from the 1930s and putting it into a modern day setting, you've just provided yourself with a piece of event content that no one else can replicate, and no one else can have the story that sits behind it. So I think, for me, the process almost doesn't change in some ways, given the situation we're in. I think it's still about finding points of difference, and a really good starting point for that is to go back in there and just search out the history of your place and how you can leverage some interesting stories within it.
Well, I think we've probably got a little bit of time to be doing some reading and some researching at the moment. So yeah. I've got some questions here from, so what are some of the things event organisers can be doing in this downtime to get better results? For example, new customers or new content. Well, you've just told us about doing some research in history, but what about how can we be looking for new customers and new content?
I guess I can go ahead with that. I like I expand on Stu's idea, and I think it's about looking back at what you've done and what you're good at. And I know our automatic reaction often is to focus on weaknesses. There's a whole body of literature that's coming out about strengths-based approaches, and so at a time when COVID, when we're all kind of sometimes grappling some days, I think it's nice if we can look back and look at what we've done well and start do that kind of mapping. Dianne, I think you spoke last week about that community asset mapping. I don't think it's necessarily time to start putting money into big budgets to acquire new and unrelated, or not unrelated, but, you know, distant customers. It is just about consolidating and exploring those partnerships and seeing, you know, once we start to do that asset mapping or that mind mapping about things, can highlight a lot of those opportunities, I think, without you know, going too crazy. It is just about, yeah, consolidating and looking at that kind of approach, I think.
Okay. Really interesting question here around, well, I'll read it actually. So in terms of strategies for combating screen fatigue, the scare factor of an aging community of not wanting locals to visit due to the risks of people coming in perhaps with the virus. They're typically not proficient online. Sometimes, how can events be monetized while breaking down that barrier to engagement? I mean, there are, yeah, plenty of barriers around engaging when people are not particularly tech savvy, but they don't want to get out either. So it's that kind of conundrum. Is there any way that we can, or any examples?
I love that question, and 10 points for whoever's asked it, because it's not an easy one. I think just from you, and this may not be what, you know, the answer people are looking for, but I just think back to when COVID kicked off, and we had great initiatives around Anzac Day, so the solidarity that we had around, was it, you know, the driveway ceremonies. I know that that's a little bit different to what we'd automatically associate with events, but it's those kind of community sense of solidarity, being part of something, you know, the community, being part of something bigger than yourself. There's also that lovely, was it the teddy bear hunt or something like that, where people had teddy bears in their windows for the kids. I just think that I'd love to see more ideas like that activate the community, and so they may not be that, you know, one-off discrete event, but it has event aspects, and as event managers and event organisers, I think we can do that. There's also, I know that there's some like, you know, ground level stuff happening with writing letters for nursing homes, and so there are some nice ideas if we think a bit more kind of laterally about our skill sets as event managers. I think that there's a lot that we can do in that space. It's not traditionally what we do, but I think we have a lot to offer. In terms of monetizing that kind of stuff, I'm not sure that I can address that one right now, but I'm sure there are ways, and there are things like grants out there, particularly for that community connectivity. And I also think there's, you know, the online events, there's actually a big market opening up now for people wanting to sponsor this kind of stuff. So I think there are opportunities. If we wanted to workshop them, we could.
I also think, coming back to what Stu was saying before, it's actually about connecting the dots that have not necessarily been connected. So if you've got this great idea for an event or whatever, but you don't know how to monetize it, well, go and sit with people or connect with people who you've never talked to before, who know about technology and apps, and you know, who might be able to ideate around the concept that you've got. So it is about connecting those dots. And Stu, I don't know whether you've got any more comment on that.
There's a couple of things that popped up in that question. It's probably a little bit of a detail from what you're saying, Dianne, but in terms of non-locals not wanting to visit, something you touched on in last week's presentation was something you talked about in Latin America as the welcome. And I think events are can be a really powerful tool as an invitation to outsiders to come in. And so if that's a prominent thing in your community as an event, when I say community, I mean your events core customer, local core customers, if that's a real fear about more people coming in, perhaps don't do any above the line advertising outside of Ballarat, and put the power in the hands of your core local customers to say, we're putting this event on, and it's a platform for you to invite in whoever you like. And give them the power back, essentially, to decide whether they want outsiders to come in or not. The second thing I'd say in relation to that question, monetizing when breaking down the barrier to engagement, cultural and artistic events that I've worked with. The one that's coming to mind the most is a little event called The Unconformity down in Queenstown in Tasmania. They've been working more broadly to create 12 months worth of impact across the year. And one of the things they're doing to do that is to create an online marketplace for the artists that they actually support when they bring in. So one of their fundamental reasons for being is to support local artists and to support artists more broadly that they bring in on a residency basis. So creating an online marketplace for those artists is one way that I've seen events monetize.
It's actually really interesting because that's a very old-fashioned concept that's been brought into the new. It's a guild, right? A guild.
Yeah.
Very old concept that was used in medieval times to share around the work. And here we are. We can bring those business models back if that's what it takes, and make them digital. Well, I've got time for another question, just one more question. In terms of getting people to come to online events, what are some of the approaches that you think would be successful to engage community interest?
So there's one that I have signed up for that I'm very likely to go to, and I had to pay for it. So already that's hooked me in. And they're sending out a little, it's like a women's professional networking thing, and they're sending out a sample pack. And so I'll actually have like a tangible goodie pack to bring along to my online experience. And it's very simple concept, but something like that I think is enough to engage me more than any of the others that I've signed up for and I haven't gone to. So I think that's one nice example.
That's a very nice, that is a very nice hook, isn't it? Yes. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point in terms of putting a price on your online event is a really important thing. That the immediate instinct would be, let's make it free because more people will come. But given the plethora of online events out there at the moment, to actually put a price on yourself, I think is the best thing you can do, because someone that sees that price would go, well, hang on, maybe this is worth more than the other 70 invitations that I've gotten this week. And in terms of engaging local community interest, again, I will always sort of rotate back to this fundamental of place. And I'd say if it's an online event that aligns with an industry that's important to Ballarat in particular, and again, you can see the industries that the creative city strategy, for example, that sits with the City of Ballarat, it's a fantastic, I think there's some really, really implementable stuff in there, and it's proving to be a pretty successful strategy from what I can gather. If it's a creative strategy or a creative event, or for that, whether it be a manufacturing event that feeds into the FMCG from Mars or whatever it might be, to engage local community support, I'd perhaps highlight things that align with innate strengths of the local area.
Can I just add to that, because I guess the other thing, I absolutely agree with those points that Stu's made there. And just the question from earlier, like we have opportunities now to go and ask our customers what they want. And so I would say, if we've got a marketing database, that kind of thing, whether you want to do a little online discussion like this, surveys, different things like that, we've got opportunity now to ask people what would they show up for, and what is it that they need in their lifestyles. I think of me with a nearly two-year-old. There's so many things that I think if someone could come up with this idea, I'd definitely be there now. I know parts of our economy have slowed down, but there are still people out there that are working in, you know, crazy hours in crazy conditions, they do have, you know, time at the weekend and money to look for those kind of moments of magic, and the event sector is positioned to take, you know, to deliver those kind of experiences.
So there's just another question. I know that we're almost out of time here, but there's just another question which kind of taps into this thread that we're talking about. And it's a question around if I'm producing an online event in comparison to my usual event format, which is face-to-face, how can I understand and how can I effectively reach this new market? So it is this point where you may actually not be, it's not the same market, but, and you've suggested that we've got these ways that we can reach out and we can connect. But we're also working perhaps in quite a compressed timeline as well. So how can we find out some of that information about what market we're supposed to be targeting and how we can best market to them if it's different, you know, your face-to-face event is different to your online event?
So I guess I think that the principles of marketing don't change. All that's changed is, you know, instead of running a physical event, you've now got face-to-face. But thinking through, I mean, we're not creating an event and putting it out, hoping people will come. We are designing an event with a target market in mind. And I think that that's quite a key differentiation there, because that's what's going to drive, you know, inform your concept design, inform your marketing strategy, where you market, whether it's marketed through Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever you go with it. You want to have that end user in mind before you go through all of that development process. That would be my recommendation for that.
Natalie, I'm conscious of the fact that we haven't given you any opportunity to talk at all.
I
Sorry
think
about
it's
that.
not at all. I think it's, you know, one of the comments I want to make, obviously online, we've got lots of people in the events sector. I think I've been one of those people that have complained that we've only ever had 12 months to deliver an event, report on event, etc. So it's how do we use this time as valuably as possible? And I think Stu talked about those fundamentals. How do we use this time to reimagine, get together? I always think a glass of wine, you know, how do we get and use this time to reimagine our events, understand new markets, understand new boundaries? If we did an event in a paddock or a shed or an oval, how do we extend and grow it? So I think it's going to be one of the things we're going to have to be really agile in the events industry. We're going to have to be mindful of communities and customers being a bit nervous. But I think it's a luxury that we've never had. I always said I always want 18 months a year to do an event, and we're going to have it. So yeah, I guess it's really just making sure that we maximise that time to look for new audiences and make sure our product is even stronger and deeper, and it emotionally connects with the customers going forward. So, you know, it was great listening to Alana and Stu, because I think we do need to use this time to do the health check. I think, as Stu said, it's going to be really important.
I could pick up on a point there, Natalie. I think the emotional engagement, I think, is a really important point to pull out there, because in the attempts to actually distill down or find out what your customers are wanting, there's surveys and there's online chat groups and those sort of things, and I think they've all got their place. But I think the idea of getting a glass of wine, as you say, and not to promote getting on the booze,
No.
but the idea of having a glass of wine with someone, often the conversations I have in my communities, the real gold starts to come out probably from about the 20 to 25 minute mark onwards of a conversation, where you really start to delve into absolutely hardcore truths that motivate people. And so when you talk about emotional connection, it might feel pretty time intensive, but to get on the phone and have conversations with core customers and spend time, acknowledge that at the 7 minute mark, you're going to have an awkward silence and it's going to feel like the conversation's ended, but it probably hasn't. And so I'd just urge people to get to that point where you understand the motive or the emotional attachment that people have to you and your product or your event. Have one-on-one conversations, I think, to add into the mix of that more quantitative data through surveys and online discussion groups and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think I'm going to have to draw this conversation to a close just as it started to really get interesting. As you suggested, Stu, I mean, I think that it is a much longer conversation, but I'm conscious of the fact that people are needing to get off this call and go and do other things. But yes, definitely a wine o'clock is a very good suggestion out of all of this. So can I thank you all, Alana and Stu and Nat, for being on the panel, and I believe that these PowerPoint presentations will be available in the resources that Alana has compiled as well. So I would like to say thank you very much on behalf of Commerce Ballarat and Federation University. Let's just keep this conversation going, and I guess what I want to do is leave everybody with the idea, who haven't you connected with, that you need to put in a call to or arrange a little Zoom meeting or whatever, so that you can connect sort of dots and do a bit of creative ideation over a glass of wine. Yeah.
Or coffee.
Oh, coffee, especially if it's morning, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you. Good afternoon. Bye.